Japanese Fairy Tale Series, Number 10. The Matsuyama Mirror.
日本の童話シリーズ第10。松山の鏡。
The Matsuyama Mirror. Long, long time ago, there lived in a quiet spot, a young man and his wife. They had one child, a little daughter, whom they both loved. I cannot with all their hearts tell ye their names, for they have been long since forgotten, but the name of the place where they lived was Matsuyama, in the province of Echigo.
松山の鏡。ずっと昔。ある静かな村に若い男とその妻が住んでいた。二人の間には一人の子供、小さな娘がいた。二人の名前は、もうずいぶん前に忘れてしまったが、住んでいた土地の名は、越後国の松山であった。
It happened once, while the little girl was still a baby, that the father was obliged to go to the great city, the capital of Japan, upon some business. It was too far for the mother and her little baby to go, so he set out alone, after bidding them goodbye, and promising to bring them home some pretty present.
娘がまだ赤ん坊の頃、父親がある用事で京へ行くことになったが、母親と赤ん坊には遠すぎた。そこで父親は二人に別れを告げ、何か素敵なお土産を持って帰ると約束して出かけた。
The mother had never been further from home than the next village, and she could not help being a little frightened at the thought of her husband taking such a long journey, and yet she.
母親は隣村より遠くへ行ったことがなかったので、夫がこのような長旅に出ることを考えると、少し怖くならざるを得なかった。
Was a little proud too, for he was the first man in all that countryside who had been to the big town where the king and his great lords lived, and where there were so many beautiful and curious things to be seen.
というのも、天皇や貴族の住む、京へ行ったのは、あの田舎町では彼が初めてだったからだ。
At last the time came when she might expect her husband back, so she dressed the baby in its best clothes, and herself put on a pretty blue dress which she knew her husband liked.
ようやく、夫の帰る時が来たので、彼女は赤ちゃんに一番いい服を着せ、夫が好きだと言っていた、きれいな青い着物を着た。
You may fancy how glad this good wife was to see him come home safe and sound, and how the little girl clapped her hands, and laughed with delight, when she saw the pretty toys her father had brought for her. He had much to.
無事に帰ってきたのを見たとき、この良き妻がどれほど喜んだことか。父親が我が娘のために持ち帰ったかわいいおもちゃを見て手を叩いて喜んだことでしょう。
Tell of all the wonderful things he had seen upon the journey, and in the town itself. I have brought you a very pretty thing, said he to his wife. It is called a mirror. Look and tell me what you see inside. He gave to her plain, white wooden box, in which, when she had opened it, she found a round piece of metal.
彼は旅の途中の町や京で見た素晴らしいもの、すべてを話した。とてもきれいなものを手に入れてきたよ。鏡と呼ばれるものだ。彼は妻に白木の箱を渡し、妻が開けると、そこに丸い金属片が入っていた。
One side was white like frosted silver, and ornamented with raised figures of birds and flowers, the other was bright as the clearest crystal. Young mother looked with delight.
片面はいぶし銀のように白く、鳥や花の模様が浮き彫りにされ、もう片面は透明な水晶のように明るかった。
Into it the astonishment, for, from its depths was looking at her with parted lips and bright eyes, a smiling happy face. What do you see? Again asked the husband.
その奥からわずかに唇を開き、目を輝かせて微笑む幸せそうな顔が彼女を見つめていた。 何か見えるかい？夫が尋ねた。
Pleased at her astonishment, and glad to show that he had learned something while he had been away. I see a pretty woman looking at me, and she moves her lips as if she was speaking, and dear me, how odd, she has on a blue dress just like mine.
留守の間に何かが分かってきたことを示して、妻を喜ばせたかったのだ。綺麗な方が私を見て、まるで話しているかのように唇を動かし、私と同じ青い着物を着ています。
Why, you silly woman, it is your own face that you see, said the husband, proud of knowing something that his wife didn't know. That round piece of metal is called a mirror. In the town everybody has one, although we have not seen them in this country place before.
どうしてだ、君が見ているのは。自分の顔だよ。夫は妻がまだ意識していないことを誇らしげに言う。丸い金物は鏡と呼ばれるもので、この田舎では見たことがなくても。町では誰でも鏡を持っている。
The wife was charmed with her present, and, for a few days could not look into the mirror often enough, for you must remember, that, as this was the first time she had seen a mirror, so, of course, it was the first time she had ever seen the reflection of her own pretty face. But she considered such a wonderful thing far too precious for everyday use, and soon shut it up in its box again, and put it away carefully among her most valued treasures. Years passed on, and the husband and wife still lived happily.
妻はこの贈り物に魅了され、数日間は鏡を何度も覗き込むことができなかった。しかし、この素晴らしいものを毎日使うにはあまりにも貴重すぎると思われて、再び箱にしまい、大切な宝物の中に収めた。年月は流れ、夫と妻は相変わらず幸せに暮らしていた。
The joy of their life was their little daughter, who grew up the very image of her mother, and who was so dutiful and affectionate that everybody loved her. Mindful of her own little passing vanity on finding herself so lovely, the mother kept the mirror carefully hidden away, fearing that the use of it might breed a spirit of pride in her little girl. She never spoke of it, and as for the father, he had forgotten all about it. So it happened that the daughter grew up as simple as the mother had been, and knew nothing of her own good looks, or of the mirror which would have reflected them.
彼らの喜びは、母親そっくりに育った幼い娘だった。誰もが彼女を愛した。母親は、娘自身のあまりの可愛らしさに虚栄心を抱き、娘が鏡を使うことで、高慢になることを恐れ、鏡を大切に印じっていた。母親はそのことを決して口にしなかったし、父親もそのことをすっかり忘れていた。そのため、娘は母親と同じように素朴に育ち、自分の美貌やそれを映し出す鏡についても知らなかった。
But by and by a terrible misfortune happened to this happy little family. The good, kind mother fell sick, and, although her daughter waited upon her day and night, with loving care, she got worse and worse, until at last there was no hope but that she must die. When she found that she must so soon leave her husband and child, the poor woman felt very sorrowful, grieving for those she was going to leave behind, and
やがて、この幸せで小さな家族に恐ろしい不幸が起こった。善良で優しい母親が病気になり、娘は昼も夜も愛情を込めて看病したが、母親はますます悪くなり、ついに死が近づいてきたとき、夫や子供と別れなければならないことを悟り、純朴な母親は悲しみでいっぱいになった。
Most of all for her little daughter. She called the girl to her and said, "My darling child, you know that I am very sick, soon I must die, and leave your dear father and you alone. When I am gone, promise me that you will look into this mirror every night and every morning. There you will see me, and know that I am still watching over you.
彼女は幼い娘を呼び寄せた。愛しい子、私の重い病気は知っているでしょう。私が亡くなったら、毎晩、毎朝、この鏡を見ることを約束して。
With these words she took the mirror from its hiding place and gave it to her daughter. The child promised, with many tears, and so the mother, seeming now calm and resigned, died a short time after.
そう言うと、母は隠していた鏡を取り出して渡した。娘は涙を流しながら約束し、母親は平静を装っていたが、しばらくして息を引き取った。
Now this obedient and dutiful daughter never forgot her mother's last request, but each morning and evening took the mirror from its hiding place, and looked in it long and earnestly. There she saw the bright and smiling vision of her lost mother. Not pale and sickly as in her last days, but the beautiful young mother of long ago.
さて、従順な娘は、母の最後の頼みを決して忘れることなく、毎朝、毎晩、鏡を隠したところから取り出しては、長い間真剣に覗き込んだ。彼女が見たのは、明るく微笑む亡き母の姿だった。晩年の青白く病弱な姿ではなく、昔の若く美しい母の姿だった。
To her at night she told the story of the trials and difficulties of the day. To her in the morning she looked for sympathy and encouragement in whatever might be in store for her. So day by day she lived as in her mother's sight, striving still to please her as she had done in her lifetime, and careful always to avoid whatever might.
夜はその日の試練と困難を語り、朝にはこれから起こるかもしれないどんなことにも共感と励ましを求めた。日々、娘は母の目に映るように生活し、生前と同じように母を喜ばせようと努め、母を悲しませるようなことがないよう気を配った。
Her greatest pain or grieve her joy was to be able to look in the mirror and say, Mother, I have been today what you would have me to be. Seeing her every night and morning, without fail, look into the mirror, and seem to hold converse with it, her father at length asked her the reason of her strange behavior.
彼女にとって最大の苦しみや悲しみは、鏡を見てこう言えることだった。お母様、私は今日、お母様がお望みの通りになりました。毎晩、毎朝、欠かさず鏡を覗き込み、鏡と会話をしているような彼女を見て、父親はその奇妙な行動の理由を尋ねた。
Father, she said, I look in the mirror every day to see my dear mother and to talk with her. Then she told him of her mother's dying wish, and how she had never failed to fulfill it. Touched by so much simplicity, and such faithful, loving obedience, the father shed tears of pity and affection.
お父様と彼女が言う。毎日鏡を見ては、お母様に会い、話をしています。そして彼女は、母が死ぬ間際に願ったこと。それを一度も欠かさなかったことを話した。あまりの純朴と忠実で愛情深さに、父は哀れに思い、涙した。
Nor could he find it in his heart to tell the child that the image she saw in the mirror was but the reflection of her own sweet face, by constant sympathy and association, becoming more and more like her dead mother's day by day.
今や鏡に映った娘自身の顔が亡き母親と日ごとに似てくる。絶え間ない共感と慕情から亡き母親の顔に日に日に似ていくのだとは到底言えなかった。